and welcome to another one of Arthur's Engage reviews. This is number 8, and it's been a while. There are of course reasons for that. One is that instead of doing the reviews on my old test track, which had certain limitations, I'm now trying to do reviews on my new larger railway, which, as you can see, is somewhat bigger than the old test track. If you're a regular with me, you'll know that I've already produced a couple of videos using this layout, but haven't yet used it for review. So anyway, here we go. This is number 8. I don't know if I've already told you that. And I'm going to take a look at two Farish models. The old 8F, which you see in front of you, and the newer, much newer, WD 280, stalwarts of freight under the banner of Warhorses, because that's what they were. Well, why review models that are no longer made, as in the case of the 8F, or indeed those that have been around for a while now and have probably already been reviewed? Well, of course, in the case of the old 8F, we never really know when somebody like Farish will come along and replace them, and even if we do, don't put them on an auction site at the very first mention, because it might take 2 or 3 years to come to fruition of the new model, and who knows what might happen in that time. Anyway, here's our old friend, the 8F. Weighs in, by the way, at 91 grams, and the haulage power I would describe as good. It looks fairly prototypical. It's typical Farish of the era, of course. It lacks convincing detail that you would get in a more modern model, but it's I mean, one thing, it's a good representation of the Warhorses valve gear here, and the other thing was that you didn't get too many problems with the front bogie, which tended to stay on the track even going through the smallest of point works, which for an Engage model of that era is quite good. It's got the typical stannier tender. There are no glass in the windows, everything is cast on, no extra detailing. And if I were to make one slight comment about the look of the model, and we'll just it would be the front end, which to my way of thinking always looked a little bit flat. Wasn't as well modelled, I don't think, as even the Black 5 by Farish, and of course these are models of a similar era. The tender, by the way, on this one has got the wire running through it for extra contact. I don't know if some of the very early ones didn't have that, because of course Farish produced that stannier tender in a number of chassis variants, even if the top stayed relatively the same. Price, I recollect, was quite expensive for its day, and then I suppose in some model shops there could even be new old stock around. The model still commands good second-hand prices on auction sites, and obviously if Graham Farish ever do release a newer version of this, then you can expect a whole raft of these to appear on the second-hand market. They were produced in a variety of numbers in Farish days, so I won't give you any numbering detail, and indeed some even with the Fowler tender rather than the Stanier one. Now updates, easy updates to this: running lights, renumbering, new glass in the windows, a new tender, because you can get a model of the Fowler tender, weathering, blackened motion, crew in the cab, all the sort of things you would do. And if you did this, you would end up with something that possibly look like this one. I would love to say that here's one I did earlier, but actually I bought this off a gentleman who lived in Leicestershire, who did all the hard work and made a very nice job of it too, and it sits quite nicely there. So there we have the 8F. You can even paint it red if you want. The Great Central had one up until quite recently that only ever ran in red livery with LMS on the camp. So there's a little bit of the prototypes for everything brigade going on here. So let's watch this standard model at work, he said. Bit noisy, but good slow movement there. So yes, let's watch it at work. First hauling the standard 7 Lima bogie coaches, and then we'll try and get it to run with a few wagons behind it, just to see what it would be, what it would look like. I'm sure you already know. We will do exactly the same with the WD, and while we're doing this, I will tell you hopefully a little bit of history about these two classes. Okay folks, here we have Stanier 8F in ordinary condition, hauling 7 Limas. Here we have Stanier 8F, extra crew, Fowler tender, bit of weathering, renumbered, lights on the front, glass in the windows, hauling 7 Limas. Bit fast that. So, in the beginning, LMS freight operations suffered from the imposition of the Midland Railway's small engine policy. You may recollect I refer to that in Engage Review number 5. So everyday service led to many freight trains being double-headed by relatively underpowered 060s. So, introduced in 1935, the standing rate F280 heavy freight locomotives incorporated the two-cylinder arrangement of the Black 5s. They were initially classified 7F, by the way, and this was later changed to the more familiar 8F. Now, on the outbreak of the Second World War, the design was freight design. The LMS 8Fs had been built by Crewe and Horwich, and then they were joined by examples from Doncaster, Darlington, Eastleigh, Ashford, Brighton and Swindon. That's not also to mention the private facilities of North British, Bayer Peacock and the Vulcan Foundry. So numbering 852 in total, the Standard 8Fs were the only locomotives to hold the distinction of having been constructed by all the big four railway companies. They went on to become one of the most widespread classes of all time. Examples working in Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Persia, Italy and perhaps most famously of all Turkey, from where examples have been saved for preservation in more recent times. Back in the UK, the 666 examples that remained or returned home after the war were, well, these became the unsung workhorses ranging far and wide over the then BR network. Standing 8F production for the War Department actually continued until 1943 when the cheaper austerity 280 was introduced. Production for the domestic market continued until 1946. The model looks great with all the refinements we've come to expect from Farish, even more when we see that the cab ventilator has been modelled open, surely a first, and just look at the tender coal space. Magnificent. The whole model has fully captured the looks of the, well, I'll call it a Dub D. Now I can put my hand on the heart, said I never saw a clean one. So buying 90201 in factory weathered specimen, this was the one for me. I was slightly dismayed that the weathering applied to my specimen, very thick and one colour of grot, certainly very inferior to the weathering on my grotty Dupole 9Fs. I find a comment that I've read in a few places that this is a base for weathering, to be at odds with the extra cost charged for these weathered models. If one is going to weather a model, then the first coat, i.e. the broad brush one of grot or whatever you're going to use, is the easiest one to apply. Anyway, rant over, and this does not detract from this model or its desirability. You can put this rant into the future improvements department. Other enhancements that you could make obviously is to add a crew, add more coal to the fantastically modelled part fill tender, or add a coal pricker and other irons into the tender tool rack, and of course running lamps if you desire. There is, of course, he said when he can find it, a piece of plastic that models a full tender, should you so desire. So you literally have all the options. So I think now is the time for seat 90201 at work hauling 7 lemurs while I tell you a little bit about the history of the class. Doesn't she run well? Okay, for those of you who like numbers, here's our WD, the old bed iron, and behind it we have some modified Pico wagons and a few tankers. coming through to some Graham Farish wagons. The rally cycle's stuck in the middle. What's it do now? Well, it's the 20th wagon in the rake. And as I said, we have some Graham Farish, and then finishing off with some of those lovely Matheson models. A trusty Pico brake van at the end. Well, before we go on to the history of the class, it's worth mentioning that the weight of the model is just 68 grams. Now that's a third lighter than the 8F, yet as will be seen in these videos, it's every bit as powerful and a good deal quieter, but of course that could be down to age. Now the motor is in the engine, leaving space, a lot of space actually, in that very large tender that the Austerities have. So there's plenty of space in there for DCC equipment and probably sound. And I say, having seen a sound equipped Austerity in N-Gauge at a model railway show this year, what an excellent advert for DCC that was. Very true to the prototype, including the clank, and I believe models are now on sale with working lights and firebox glow, should you have the pound notes and inclination to go that far. The model also comes with a few other numbers available, one of which is the last number, carrying the name Vulcan. And of course, if you're a Longmoor military railway fan, or you have an excuse for an army train, then there is one in the army colours of red and blue that's available in a train pack that also includes a few coaches, and very attractive it is too. And so to history. I mean, the Austerity 280, as we know, was based on the LMS 8F, which until that point in the war had been the government standard design, but experience with the 8F had shown it to be unsuitable, as it required too many man hours to build. It used materials that were either in short supply or liable to become short due to wartime conditions. So various modifications were made to the 8F design by Mr. R.A. Riddles, who was the LMS mechanical and electrical engineer for Scotland. He did this in order to prioritise low cost over design life. These modifications included a boiler of simpler construction. It was parallel rather than tapered, and a round top firebox rather than a Belpaire firebox. The firebox itself was made of steel rather than the rarer and more expensive copper. Now in total 935 were ordered by the Ministry of Supply, making it, the WD that is, one of the most produced classes of BR steam locos. The North British Locomotive Company of Glasgow built 545 examples. These were split between their two works at Hyde Park and Queen's Park. And the Vulcan Foundry of Newton-le-Willows in Lancashire built 390. North British also, by the way, built a larger 210 version, but in much smaller numbers. Now that comes on to the numbers game itself. You probably will have seen, if you're a WD fan, pictures of them carrying various numbers at various times. Basically, WD numbers 800 to 879 were ordered as LMS Class 8F. Number 9312, the last one built, was named Vulcan when new. North British builders' plates were not all in the correct sequence and were mixed up between the two Glasgow works. Also, they were mixed up between batches. All locomotives had their WD numbers increased by 7,000 or 70,000, prior to shipping to mainland Europe, the invasion. Those completed after 5th of September 1944 carried the 70,000 number series from new. Now all but three, numbers 77223, 77369 and 79250, saw service with the British Army in mainland Europe after D-Day. Now post-war disposals. After the end of the conflict, the War Department disposed of 930 locomotives, 2 being retained by the War Department and 3 being scrapped. 200 of these were sold to the LNER on the North Eastern Railway, who classified them as Class 07 and renumbered them 3000 to 3199. Now in 1948, another 533 locomotives were purchased by the British Transport Commission. We're now into the British Railways era. So with the creation of British Railways, the 733 locomotives, that's the 200 LNER plus the 533 from the British Transport Commission, were then renumbered in the 90,000 to 90732 series. Only one of these, numbers 90732, the last number, was named, becoming Vulcan, after the Vulcan Foundry, where many of these locomotives were built. There were also a few exported abroad, 12 to Hong Kong, and also 184 remained in mainland Europe, mostly working in around the Netherlands. Finally, one went to the US Army Transportation Corps. We swapped it for one of their S-160 class locos. That's a post-war exchange. 2 locos continued to be held in War Department stock, and they saw service on the Longmoor Military Railway in Hampshire, along with 2 of the 210 locomotives that had also been built. Now, one WD-280 has survived, Vulcan Foundry Works number 5200. It was repatriated from Sweden to the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, becoming number 90733. Okay, now for some marking. On the WD side, for the 3Ps, price 90 out of 100. Yes, it's expensive, but you're getting a lot of model in N-Gauge for your money, and there are discounted ones to be seen occasionally. Performance 95 out of 100, certainly from what I've seen from my model and a few other videos. These models perform exactly as we would want to. Now, how close is it to the prototype? Well, again, 90 out of 100. I think it's a very good model. I didn't mention the wheels. The driving wheels, they're superbly modelled, and that disc front pony wheel, so prototypical. Anyway, so good marks all round really. Now bonus marks, yes, 5 for that tender. That tender is a wonderful model. So that gives a total of 93.3 out of 100, which is a high number. and it deserves it. Marks for the 8F, well, of course, in its day it would have probably got similar marks, because again it was expensive, the performance was good, probably as good as any other Graham Farish model of its era, and it was a good enough representation of the prototype, and it would have got a few marks because it stayed on the rails. So there we go. Hope you've enjoyed World of N-Gage, and see you next time. Bye for now.